Welcome to the Orthodontic Pearls podcast, where we share tips and tricks to better your clinic, business, and life. Today we have our honored guest, Dr. Bryan B-MAC Lockhart, as we discuss clear aligners, enhanced efficiency by going digital, and tons of life improvement pearls. And now your hosts of the podcast, Drs. Chris Teeters, Brian Anderson, and Andy Sarpadar.
All right, Pearls viewers, welcome to another great podcast of the Orthodontic Pearls group. Today with us, we have a very special guest, Dr. Bryan Lockhart.
Hey. What's going on?
Good to have you with us. Of course, today we are missing our Brian Anderson. What do we say Brian was doing today? I think he's like on the toilet or something, or getting an object removed, but some kind of lame excuse. But he won't be with us today, so that means he can't defend himself, which is nice. So you guys are coming to us from the Paul Homily course out there in North Carolina. And, tell us a little bit about how the course is going so far. I think this is your first night, so just getting settled in. How's that going, guys?
I mean, yeah, like you mentioned, this is our first night. So we kind of kick it off tomorrow. So it's pretty nice. I'm looking forward to it. I think it's going to be a good meeting. Dr. Homily is very good at speaker development, especially in our profession. And I'm looking forward to it. So yeah, we're down in Charlotte at the Ritz. You can't tell, but Chris and I are actually in the same room. He invited me to his room tonight.
Interesting.
It's a little awkward, but it's okay. It's late, but it's all right.
And I understand, Chris, you had a big milestone tonight. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'd say so. I mean, those who know, I went on this fitness journey preparing for a bodybuilding competition. I couldn't have any alcohol. And I'm like, Andy, I'm going to stick with this for a while. I like how I'm feeling or whatever. And tonight I have my first drink in a year and I feel great, heavily buzzed off of one. And then, I invited Brian to my hotel room at 9 p.m. So we'll see where this takes us, guys. So
Now, be honest with me, Brian, did he actually put any alcohol in that drink?
So the thing is, I was not with him, so I can't vouch.
Oh, okay.
So we have to take his word for it. He's an honest man. I'm
happy to see you back, Teeters. I've missed you. You are absolutely insufferable when you're sober, and I am so happy to see you buzzed again.
Glad to be back.
On that topic of fitness, we were talking about this a little bit before the show, but it's interesting. One of the big themes that we keep coming back to is balance between our different ambitions. We talked about the pillars of our lives. And, when we had Jacob Koch on the podcast, he was talking about how it was just unsustainable to maintain the 12-pack abs, as I call it, or, whatever that starvation deprivation ritual was that kept him in bodybuilding shape. And I know like your thoughts were a little bit different back then, Chris, but what are your thoughts on that now? Have you changed a little bit?
I'd say I have. My personality is to really go after something and go all in. And I did, and I felt like I reached a milestone. But the day, just like Jake said, that I looked my best, I felt my absolute worst. And there are other ramifications than when you get to that level. And I think moderation is the key. I think it's important we strive for high goals, like be on the side of trying to be fit and be active and be the best you can be. But if you take it to an extreme, like I will never drink, I will never do this, and you're on so far the opposite extreme, you have a lot of kickback from that. You don't get to enjoy those moments with your friends where you're in that same state of mind. And you also get to a point where if you're at 6% body fat, which is what I was testing at, there are other ramifications that I did not expect.
And mouth flex he just threw in there real quick.
Not a flex at all, my friend. I'm freezing all the time. I'm miserable. Testosterone was extremely low. Like there were a lot of things that you don't want. So I think the key is moderation. I think it's important to strive to be the best you can be. But if you take it to the extreme of always and never, and you're so polarized, you really miss out on, I think, that middle ground that's really where the sweet spot should be. So I think we're all in search of that sweet spot, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, that applies to everything. It doesn't matter if it's fitness, if it's something professionally, whatever the circumstance. I think moderation is always best. And then I think the beauty of it is to be able to peak off in one direction when you need to, but then kind of try to live in the moderation zone, I think is the healthiest way to be. And like I said, that's a very vague statement, but it's so applicable to everything in general.
Sometimes the best solutions are the simplest. And I think that moderation is the absolute key there. Doesn't mean you don't push yourself. And then sometimes you have to over deliver a little bit, you lose a little bit of sleep or a little bit of stress there, but at your set point, you always want to come back to that mean, and that should be a healthy place. So, I think that there's got to be a balance between the Teeters 12 pack and the Bryan Belly Bloat. Yeah, that's what I'll call it. He's not here. He can't defend himself. Yeah. And I like to think of that as what I call it, the Sarpo sweet spot. So, I like to think of myself as a pinnacle of moderation. So we'll just end that discussion right there and move on.
Basic Andy. Okay, got
it. Basic. Okay. All right. There it is. So today we want to talk about a post from Zach Nelson on the forum. And this is a very pertinent one. You guys, of course, are at the Angel Aligner speakers training right now. And Zach had an interesting post about Angel Aligners and their pricing model. So this is a little bit of a long one. I'll try to get through it as quick as I can. But he says, it's interesting to me, the psychology of the way different people do business. I think I've tried literally every aligner company and have always hated the tiered model of price decreases with increased volume. I've never pushed aligners and I really don't ever want to. If my patient wants them, then I'm happy to treat with aligners. But what's crazy to me is that I'm sure I wasn't the only one letting these companies know that I hate the tiered model. I really don't like feeling pressure to sell aligner cases to keep my discount. I don't think anyone does. So after trying all of them, I switched to a company that's reasonably priced and there's no quota to hit every month. I'm really happy with Angel Aligners. He goes on to say that some of the other aligner companies have come back and tried to earn his business, and that feels sort of shady to him. It was a real turnoff, left a bad taste in his mouth. And this got a lot of post engagement. I know Chris and I both commented on this, but what do you guys think of this tiered pricing model? And then in a bigger sense, this idea of sort of, it comes off to me almost as like a lack of integrity, leading with a high offer. And then when that's rejected, backtracking and say, you know what, actually we could do it for cheaper. Just please buy our product. Why don't we start with you, Bryan? What are your thoughts as we read a post like this?
Yeah, so I think it was a very interesting post for a couple of different reasons. And, I've had some interactions with Zach and, he's, to me, come off as somebody that's logical and likes to think about things that way, as I like to think of myself that way as well. And so I like to think of it from three different perspectives, right? Because I think depending on where you lay on the topic is how you're going to feel about it. So the first thing is when you think about the company that has these tier prices, it is an absolute win-win for them, right? So there's a fee that we're going to receive for you to do this, but we're going to take a marginal amount off of that fee, but then you have to do double or triple the amount of cases to get that minuscule percentage off. And so that, as a company, I would love the tier system because not only that, but you're fighting to scrap and claw to make sure you can reach these quotas, which again, if I am, the stakeholder or the CEO of the company, that's beneficial. Now, when you take it to the side of us as the providers, I think there's it's a nuance there as well, where it's kind of like a separation, and it kind of depends on the practice you're in. So if we're specifically talking about aligners and a quota, and you happen to be a high volume aligner company, then you're going to love that tier system because one, that's the way you were going to treat anyway. So it's like, well, if I was going to do this anyway, why not reap the benefits of a cheaper fee to do it? Where it becomes a problem is the other side, which is the typical orthodontic office where the majority of the cases are still fixed, right? And so you have aligner cases, and whatever that percentage is, 20, 25%, 30%, whatever you want to call it, most offices are still majority fixed. And the problem with that is you're going to have some quarters where the numbers are going to be high. You're going to hit these quotas. The prices are going to be good. And then there's going to be times where it's going to be low. And when it goes low, that's where it becomes problematic. And that's where he kind of hinted on, Zach did, about, selling the aligners. And I think whenever you're in a position where the decision to treat your patient or the highest priority of the decision making is not based on the patient's best interest, that's where it gets dangerous. And so, I've been there before, right? I can't sit up here and act like I've never done it, where I've gotten close to that quota back when I used to use another company, and I would throw a family member or an assistant, in treatment just to hit it. And, if you think about it, it's like, okay, if you are met with a situation where you think, okay, braces is a straightforward kind of treatment for this patient. But if I'm 3 cases short of meeting there, you might do something that you wouldn't have done otherwise. So right. I think depending on where you lie is how you'll feel about it. But I think ultimately outside of the companies, tiered pricing is probably not the best idea.
I have similar feelings there. Now, Chris, I know you and I are both majority bracket braces fix practices. Obviously, we're in a similar area. We practice 7 miles away from each other. So, not a ton of aligner demand for whatever reason. What are your thoughts on that?
My thoughts are along those same lines. If you're a heavy wire and bracket practice and you're in the highest number of DSOs per capita state who have these crazy low prices for their aligner cases, you just can't compete with them, because most people think, an aligner is an aligner, even though we know that it's really the architect behind those aligners that make it happen. It's hard to justify a price that's almost half. If we're double, it makes it really, really hard to stay in the aligner space. And that's a significant part of our practice. So even as a heavily wire and bracket practice, it's nice when there's not a tiered system of, hey, this is the price, this is what it is. And maybe there's like a little bit of a system. Like if you do, what I've really loved about Angel is it's very, very low. Like if you do, I think it's like 10 cases in 3 months, you can maintain that $849 pricing. And then it only goes up by $100. And then if you don't do any cases, it's like $1049 is their highest price. And that is like the low price for the super platinum from other companies.
Right.
So it allows you to stay in the space, even if you don't feel like you have to push aligners on patients to meet a quota. I never liked that, where I felt like I had to reach that next level. It's like, if the patient is better in brackets, they should be in brackets or light force. But if the patient can do better in aligners, or they really want to do aligners, then we can offer it to them at a price that's fair. So I have a little insight tonight I can share. I had some drinks with the aligner team tonight and with Angel, and they're not changing their prices for 2025. So everybody thought, we're going to get the market share, and then we're just going to jack our prices up. So you guys can know all of 2025. Angel will not change their pricing. And then going forward, they said if they do, it would be very nominal, like $50 or something. It's not going to jump from like $1,000 to like $1,800 all of a sudden.
Yeah.
And I heard that from the CEO. So I think you can, if you're going to give Angel a shot, then, you don't have to worry about them jumping their prices anytime soon. So that's nice.
So Chris, what I'm hearing from you is pricing is a big factor. And maybe even if there's a sort of a pseudo tiered system or even a tiered system there, as long as the top line price is still below what other aligner companies are charging, then that makes it worth it to you.
It is, as long as the product's just as good. And like I said in my talk at MOPC, I will never use a product that's inferior regardless of price. Yeah. But if you can have a product that's just as good or possibly better in some ways, like the integrated buttons, then it's a no-brainer. But all things considered, if it's a similar product or same product, you can get the same results with it, then price is a factor. Absolutely.
Brian, you were saying how beneficial that is to the aligner company. Obviously, they have us running in circles. They're changing our incentives. And the more that we get away from a pure incentive for patient care, recommending the best product for them, and the more we're thinking about, well, my expenses are going to go up if I don't use this product, it does sort of skew the conversation. It's going to bias you quite clearly there. So obviously I'm a speaker for Ormco. I'm a little outnumbered here. You guys speak for Angel, but that was a big reason why I went with Spark aligners as well. And, talking about tiered system, what I really like about that is I am primarily a fixed practice like you, Chris. So it's nice that for me, I don't have to worry so much about my aligner volume because I already get the biggest discount. And again, Spark is not super expensive. It's around the same price. Their top line fees I think it's around $1049 too. But I don't have to worry about it at all because I get the lowest price just based on my bracket volume.
Right. So if you can bundle, that's nice.
Exactly. But not only that, but if you join certain buyers groups out there, and there's more and more of them coming up, you can usually lock in a good group pricing. So you don't have to worry about volume at all. So I think that there's ways around this no matter what company that you use. I have heard a lot of stuff about Angel, really good stuff. I've never used them myself, but I think that the bottom line comes down to, are you doing the best for your patients? And are you buffering yourself from poor incentives to provide the wrong treatment or maybe not the most optimal treatment there? Any final thoughts on this?
I think it's a great post. And I hope that all the aligner companies see that like these outrageous tiers are not the future, and it's just going to upset a lot of orthodontists. So that's my message out there is like, hey, if you're planning on doing your pricing structure for 2025, don't push a quota or a tiered system on us. It's just going to make us choose another alternative.
He used a hashtag. What was it?
Zach used a hashtag?
Yeah, go pound sand or something.
It's like death to quota. It was something. I can't remember what it was.
I'm looking for it. Let me see. Did he put that in the actual post? I don't see it in the actual post. It's a long
toward the end. It's literally at the end, but it's like death to quotas or something. I don't know. I can't remember.
He did say the last line here, the quota model is dead in my humble opinion. Hopefully that's true. I hate the quota model as well. But I do want to just comment on that let's flip this around a little bit. Do you guys offer family discounts in your office?
Mm-hmm.
We do.
I mean, one could argue that's kind of the same principle there, is that the more volume that you're giving a business, the more discount that you're going to get. Obviously, we can understand that on our side where we are okay taking a cut per capita if we have more per capita coming in. It's just a volume game. So on the one hand, I'm not sure that it's immoral to do something like this or that we should be too harsh on these companies. It's arguably more in their interest than it is in ours, unless, like you said, Bryan, you happen to be one of those high volume practices that's going to benefit from that right away. And those arguably are the most valuable practices to these companies. So
That's the point I was making. Like, it all depends on where you lie in the situation. So the thing
yeah.
is, and this is what it boils down to, is I can't be mad at a company for wanting to make or be as profitable as they can be. At the
Mhm.
same time, if that doesn't align with me, though, I don't have to accept that and be happy about it. So the two things
Absolutely.
can be true. It's like you have, as a company, your own goals and what's important to you. And then as a provider, as a doctor or a customer to these companies, I have that same opportunity to do what's in my best interest. And if they align, I think that's the best match. But if they don't, then both of us can do what we want to do. So yeah, I don't fault the
Yes.
companies for wanting to do it, but if it puts us or puts me in a position that I'm not doing what's best for my patients or feeling like I have to do things that are not best, then I have to pivot and do otherwise.
If you're an orthodontist that wants to connect with over 500 colleagues, hear over 30 of the best speakers in orthodontics, and see 50 of the most cutting-edge exhibits, have a chance to win some of over $70,000 worth of prizes, including a trip to Kauai, and enjoy the absolute best parties in orthodontics, you won't want to miss the 7th annual MOPC, the Mother of Pearls Conference, coming this October 9th through 11th. We're going big for our 7th year by renting out the Astronaut Memorial Foundation at the Kennedy Space Center in Cape Canaveral, Florida. This is the hub for NASA, where they train more astronauts than anywhere else in the world, and SpaceX launches occur all the time. We toured the campus, and let me tell you, it's like the Disney World of space, with theme park attractions, actual space shuttles, interactive exhibits, and real astronauts. On top of the best speakers, we'll be having our world-famous Friday Night Pearls party under the Saturn Apollo 5 rocket, with dinner, drinks, space-themed activities, and live music from the world's only all-orthodontist band, Relapse. Early bird prices are about to go up for every 100 tickets sold and have already gone up twice. Be sure to register today with your team at orthodonticpearls.org to get the best price for the best conference in orthodontics. Plus, we are the only conference with worry-free registration. If anything comes up and you can't make it for any reason, you can transfer your registration to next year's conference absolutely free. It's a no-brainer. So be sure to lock in your best price by registering you and your team for the best conference in orthodontics, the Mother of Pearls Conference, at orthodonticpearls.org today.
You know, I have said this for so long about a company that I'm not allowed to. I don't think I'm legally allowed to say their name. I think you get sued if I don't use their product. So if I say their name, I'm probably going to get a letter. There was like a $28 million lawsuit. You guys probably all know the company I'm talking about. But again, I'm not going to put it out there and risk anything. But I've said that a long time. Yeah, there is an emotional component there. I didn't love that when I graduated from dental school. This was when they had basically taken over the whole orthodontic space and changed it in a way that was not necessarily what I signed up for. But on the other hand, they are a company doing what's best for their shareholders, and you can't get too angry at them. But I'm also not going to fall for something that's not in my best interest. It doesn't do me any good paying $2,000 per case. And no amount of technology or customer service is going to make that worth it when the low price alternative is just as good and about half the fee. So yeah, I think that's what it comes down to, is making rational decisions for your own practice and understanding what your goals and values are.
Absolutely.
I would like to move on to your story there, Bryan. So you have a very interesting one. Obviously, you're a all or mostly digital guy at this point. I'd love to hear your career path, from your education, how you got into orthodontics, and then how that segued into your decision to go all or mostly digital.
I'll keep the journey brief, but basically, I wanted to be a dentist since I was probably in middle school. Like, that was always the goal. I don't know why. It was something about I never wanted to. I mean, I know I wanted to be in the medical field, but being an actual like MD never intrigued me, because at the time the hours were ridiculous and they were doing all, like, there's no cap on the hours they could work or couldn't work and whatnot. So I know dentistry was where I wanted to be. And when I was in undergrad at Morehouse in Atlanta, Georgia, all male private school, super small school. I
How was that?
Yeah. Well, I will say this: there wasn't all female school, literally in walking distance from it, called Spelman. Like
Okay.
brothers and sisters and whatnot.
Yeah.
So the AUC is what it's called, because another one's called Clark Atlanta University. They're literally all right in the same area, and they're co-ed. So it wasn't as rough as it sounds.
It sounds rough. I've always had that. I've always thought about that. Like
yeah. But we had a dental club meeting at Morehouse, and we used to always have different, doctors and people from admissions come down and talk to us. And there was a guy from Case Western came down, and I don't even know what he was talking about. But at the end of the talk, we were just kind of, chopping it up and whatnot. And this is before I really even knew anything about orthodontics. Like I didn't have braces as a kid. I wasn't really aware of all the specialties and whatnot. I mean, I knew of them, but I didn't really have an idea. And he mentioned, he's like, listen, if you guys get into dental school, what you want to do is you want to do orthodontics. And that was something that stuck with me, because this is a guy that's in admissions. He's on the academic side, and he has a lot of, I guess, interactions with, different students and people that come in and go out. And so I thought if anybody had an idea or impulse on what the profession is or where it's going, it would be him. And that's something that sort of stuck with me. And when I got to Chapel Hill for dental school, I started shadowing in the grad program. They're twins, the Murdoch twins.
I know the Murdochs. Yeah.
Yeah. So they went to my same school. They went to that same all male private small school called Morehouse.
That's
as well.
quite a school, man. They're graduating ballers out of there.
And so, that was kind of a connection. And I think it was John. I actually never talked to them about this. I can't remember which one it was, either Sean or John. Kind of was like my mentor. They, let me put colors on their patients and whatnot. And so I kind of got a good feel for orthodontics from that. And then I was locked in after that. And so that's how I pretty much got into orthodontics. And so I met my wife in dental school. She did her ortho at Baylor. I did a GPR at Monty for a year. And before going down to Jacksonville for ortho, met a pretty wild, crazy bunch at my 2 years down in Jacksonville. Some really good people.
Who were your classmates at Jacksonville? There's like a surprisingly large number of prominent orthodontists coming out of Jacksonville. Like who did you have around your time?
So when I was there, unfortunately, I had Chris Feldman. He was in my class. Yeah, it was, you. So it was him. Chris said it was a year ahead of me. Fishbein was a year ahead of me. So we were all there together. I feel like I'm leaving somebody out that I can't think of right now. But
wasn't Jude Fairchild in that class too?
Yeah, Jude was there. He was with Chris and Ben. So yeah, it was a pretty interesting group, a great time there. I mean, I like the way things were kind of set up. I think it fit me well in terms of I'm very clinical. Even to this day, like you'll be hard pressed to find me lecturing about anything that's not clinically based. And when I'm not, I always try to sprinkle a little bit in. And so that's what JU was for me. And so it was great, because I did the GPR and then the 2 years at Jacksonville. My wife did 3 years at Baylor. So we actually graduated at the same time. And then we went to New York to do a surgical orthodontic surgical fellowship.
Wow. So now your wife, you said she's also an orthodontist, right?
Yeah. She's orthodontist as well.
And you guys, so you graduate from ortho residency, and then you go on to do a fellowship together at which school was that?
It was Jacoby Medical Center. It's in the Bronx.
Okay.
And so I did it full time, and she did it part. Yeah, in the boogie down.
Yeah.
And so she did it part time. I did it full time, and so she worked and she did the grind and taking. I mean, she had probably had about 4 different jobs. I mean, hats off to anybody that is an associate working in New York, man. Y'all are doing the grind, man. And she was on it. She was hustling. But then we came back down to Charlotte. We were supposed to end up in Atlanta, which is where I'm from. And she, worked her magic on me. And we ended up stopping in Charlotte instead of making it back down south.
Chris and I know how that goes. Yeah. We both ended up in Phoenix because of our wives. So
there you go.
Yeah.
So that's how I pretty much got into it, and that's my journey. I said I was gonna make it quick, but I think it was actually longer.
No, I love it. I think that was awesome. So so quite a journey. You've had some really prestigious classmates throughout the years. One of the things Chris and I always talk about is you're the product of the 5 people closest to you. So I'm sure those people influenced you. You've graduated, you're done with your fellowship. Now you're in North Carolina. Which city do you practice in again? Charlotte? Okay. Charlotte.
Yep.
And do you guys practice together?
Yeah. So what we did was the whole plan was to come down, find an associate job for about 6 months or so, and then open up our own practice. Because she hadn't lived in Charlotte since high school. So she didn't really have an idea of like, what's the good spot to open up or whatnot. And at the time, North Carolina was very strict on corporate dentistry. Like it was like, no, it's not
Really?
happening. The good thing is, you couldn't do that. But the downside is, that's literally everybody's pit stop, before you
Yep.
open up is go work that corporate grind, make some money, learn what you don't want to do and how you don't want to practice, and then open up. And so it was rough, and it was two of us, and we were living with her parents, and it was like,
Hmm.
all right, well, if we don't have any opportunities, then we're just gonna have to do what we have to do, and that's what we did. So we bought a condo that was foreclosed at the
Hmm.
time, and so we got it for a good price. And as we were looking at it, we saw like the build out in the condo next door, and it's like that looks kind of dental-esque a little
Hmm.
bit. And then found out that was a pediatric dentist who was opening her practice right around the same time that we would be. And
Wow.
yeah, and so it worked out to be a pretty good relationship that we had with her. And then right next door to us is a general dentist as well. And my wife actually knew him. She shadowed with him when she was still in high school. So it was like it come full circle, and it was the best thing. And so we opened it up from scratch. I mean, it was nothing but dirt on the
Yep.
ground. And so we built it, all the way up, and went from 0 patients to where we are now. And
Yeah.
and then we opened up probably 3 years after that, opened a second location with my wife's twin sister, who's a general dentist. And so we
Oh,
do
very cool.
general and ortho out of that second location.
Beautiful. Chris and I both work with our wives. So my wife's also an orthodontist. Chris's wife is a pediatric dentist who works right next door. What's it like working with your wife? I know we get that question all the time, but
Yeah.
do you guys see each other like every day? Do you have any kind of boundaries around talking about work at home, or is that something that's just not necessary for you? How do you balance that relationship with work?
So it's a funny story. Like the way we do it now is definitely not the way we started. So the first thing we wanted to do is figure out, probably you guys did the same thing, is, what does this look like if we are around each other all the time, both
Mm-hmm.
professionally and then personally? Like what does that look like? How does that feel? And so we use the fellowship to kind of give us an idea about that, because we were, there's only 2 rooms for the orthodontic department of that. And so she worked one, I worked one. We shared patients. So we kind of got a dose of it there, and actually wasn't that bad. And so we were like, you know what, we can do this. And so when we opened up, we practiced together. We were there the same days. It was great because I felt like, if I was a little long in a consult, I didn't have to rush out because I knew she would take it over. Or if I, got into a case and I wanted to do something last minute, I could do it. And again, know that I'm not holding the clinic up. And it was great. And then one day she came to me and she's like, I don't want to work all these days anymore. And I'm like, are you, what do you, what do you mean? And this is kind of like, we'll kind of
Chris
get
is
into
nodding his
later,
head there.
but
It sounds like he's good. He can relate. Yeah.
I've been there.
I want to hear that in just a sec. Yeah.
I want to hear what you have to say too, Chris. But the thing is too, is like, it was kind of crazy because my mindset and her mindset were like polar opposites. Like I'm thinking, hey, listen, it's 2 of us. We have these 2 locations. We can, open up. We'll, get assistance. We'll have these days. And this kind of like this growth mindset of, being able to do what we want to do. And she's kind of like, no, that's not me. But if you want to do that, go for it, have at it. And the thing is, and to this day, I respect her so much for that. And I think that was sort of the start of how I actually had a mindset shift. We even used to work Fridays. And then, that's kind of where she drifted out first. She's like, I'm not working any Fridays. And I'm like,
Mhm.
no, we need to work Fridays. She's like, same thing. Like, I'm not working Fridays. You can. And so I was like, well, if you're not working Fridays, I'm not working Fridays. But that's how I got down to 3 days a week. And so it's like, I'm thankful
Lead the way.
for that. And for, for her not to look at my demands and look at kind of what I want and just go with it, even though she didn't want to, for her to, stand up to that and really know what she wanted. Like I said, I thank her for that, because who knows where I would have taken us had she let me go wild, with everything. So to this day, she works 1 day a week. I work 3 days a week. We don't work together.
That's good balance.
And so when she's off, She's taking care of the kids, getting them off to school. My day off, I take the kids to school, pick them up, and do the whole deal. And so it gives us both the balance, and it works out. And it's been
awesome.
good.
We have a very similar dynamic because my wife's also an orthodontist. So we trade off. Usually, I think there's only one day a week that we're both working. That day sucks. It's like, just like we get spoiled because like in the morning we got to like get our daughter ready for daycare. And like, dude, I mean, we don't start work till 9:00. It's not that bad. But
yeah. What are you griping about, Andy?
Yeah, I know. Right. I know. We got it pretty good, but it's just those mornings like, I got to get up like 15 minutes early. I got to do a diaper, all that stuff. As opposed to just my normal, when it's my turn to watch Chloe, I just chill and take her in. Chris, I want to hear from you. Your eyes kind of lit up around that, wife wanting to cut back a little bit. Now you're in a different situation because you can't cover for her. She's kind of like, she's your main referral source. So it's like, It's almost like, well, if you don't work, then I can't work.
Yeah.
We're also used to dental school and ortho where we had to put in like 7 days a week, right? Like it was just constantly grinding. And then when you get out, you're thinking, oh man, like if we just grind and even do 5 days a week, which is cutting back from the 7 days of continual study and hard, like we'll be able to meet our goals and pay off debt and really get into a position where we work because we want to, not because we have to. And we kind of had that same mindset. Let's go and work as much as we can. And, and I was working Monday through Friday for years. And then I cut down to 4 and I was like, oh, this is so nice. And then when I did 4 for a while, I was like, oh man, I can't wait to get to 3.
It's that lifestyle creep, man.
It is. And then you start to realize that your time is the most valuable 100%. Thing you can possibly purchase. The whole point of money is a conduit to do things you enjoy. So if you're giving that up to earn more money, you've missed the whole point of money. And we have some friends that, we talk to that are, hitting it the 6-7 days a week and just getting the most expensive things they can. And that could be fine. But I think like if I'm going to buy anything, I would like to buy time, like with my kids or the freedom to do more exercise or whatnot. So I think our wives, like they always know more than we do. They're ahead of us a little bit. And so they want to scale back. We fight a little bit. We'll go, all right, we'll be the breadwinner or whatever. And then we slowly start scaling back. So I think you're 3 and 1. That's great. Morgan and I are like 3 and 3 now. Mm-hmm. So it's about the same, but she has some associates. So sometimes she'll take some time off, but I've got to be there as the solo doc. And, but it works out well. I think eventually she wants to get to 2 and I feel like I could do 3 indefinitely. I feel like that's a good balance of doing ortho that I love, but also having more time off than I'm in the office to do other things that are, I've been reading so many books about the second half of life, right? Like we spend the first half to be successful and then we realize, oh, is that all there is? Mm-hmm. Is this what it's all about? And then you realize, well, now I got to find my true self. And, that second half of life is, giving back and doing things that are beyond just our career,
Absolutely.
Jim Carrey had a really good quote about that. He said that he wishes that everyone could obtain massive fortune and fame so they could realize how empty it really is. Now I'm paraphrasing. Yeah. That's not the exact quote, but you get the idea. And I think that we fixate on these things, and obviously anyone who becomes an orthodontist is extremely driven. I mean, the sacrifice it takes to get to that point. We were all around the same time, I think. What year did you graduate, Bryan?
2013.
Right. So that was me too. And Chris, you were around the same time, I think, right?
I was 13 as well. Yeah. All of us.
We're all like the same generation from orthodontics. It was tough to get into ortho. When I was going through it, it was like top 1% of your class, depending on which school you go to. You had to get like high 90s on the board exam. It was the toughest specialty to get into. And you don't get through all of that without this mentality of delayed gratification, learning how to really buckle down and go to the extreme when it's necessary, like we talked about earlier. One thing I've noticed is separates orthodontists from some other specialties, and I'm going to pick on oral surgery directly. A lot of my friends, and you tell me if you guys relate to this, a lot of my friends in dental school were either oral surgeons or orthodontists or future specialists. There was so much that connected us in terms of drive and potential, but the difference was I felt like the oral surgeons actually got off on that work. It was
being grilled and being hard.
Yeah, being hard. I mean, you Chris Feldman, he's always talking about David Goggins and all that stuff. Just being hard for the sake of being hard. And there's something to respect in that, but it's just not me. It's like for me, I want to push to the extreme, know that I can do it, and then back off a little bit and have some kind of lifestyle on the other side of that.
The problem with that is there's no end to that. There's no end to that continual drive. And then what you start to realize in your later years is if you're always needing to push yourself to that, as far as you possibly can go, what have you missed along the way?
If you're an orthodontist that wants to connect with over 500 colleagues, hear over 30 of the best speakers in orthodontics, and see 50 of the most cutting-edge exhibits, have a chance to win some of over $70,000 worth of prizes, including a trip to Kauai, and enjoy the absolute best parties in orthodontics, you won't want to miss the 7th annual MOPC, the Mother of Pearls Conference, coming this October 9th through 11th. We're going big for our 7th year by renting out the Astronaut Memorial Foundation at the Kennedy Space Center in Cape Canaveral, Florida. This is the hub for NASA, where they train more astronauts than anywhere else in the world, and SpaceX launches occur all the time. We toured the campus, and let me tell you, it's like the Disney World of space, with theme park attractions, actual space shuttles, interactive exhibits, and real astronauts. On top of the best speakers, we'll be having our world-famous Friday Night Pearls party under the Saturn Apollo 5 rocket, with dinner, drinks, space-themed activities, and live music from the world's only all-orthodontist band, Relapse. Early bird prices are about to go up for every 100 tickets sold and have already gone up twice. Be sure to register today with your team at orthodonticpearls.org to get the best price for the best conference in orthodontics. Plus, we are the only conference with worry-free registration. If anything comes up and you can't make it for any reason, you can transfer your registration to next year's conference absolutely free. It's a no-brainer, so be sure to lock in your best price by registering you and your team for the best conference in orthodontics, the Mother of Pearls Conference, at orthodonticpearls.org today.
So I think to that point, Chris, I think what's important about all of this, and it took me a while to get to that point, is to, as quick as you can, figure out what it is that you want.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's important, because if you don't know what you want, and it doesn't come easy, like it didn't happen for me, the first 3-4 years of practice, right? Like it wasn't apparent. It was just, let's just go out and just do as much as I can, or, whatever. You just come out guns blazing. But when I really sat down, like I said, when we had these conversations with my wife and whatnot, and we talked about all this stuff, and she was very clear about what she wanted. Like our nanny is spending more time with our kids than we are, and I don't want that. And she was very adamant about that. And she was pointing about, knowing what she wanted. And I admired that. And that made me kind of have to, self-reflect a little bit and try to figure out, okay, well, what do I want? Because if you're just out here just going, there is no end, and then there's no happiness. And I don't think that anybody can ever get to 100% complete happiness and sustain it forever. But you can get to a level that you're comfortable and that you can be satisfied with if you know what you want. And I think that is kind of the most important thing that I think that ever happened in, for me professionally, which kind of ties into like why I do what I do in terms of, the technology that I have in my office, the way I practice, is because when I became very directed in terms of what I want out of life, everything that I did moved in that direction. And if it didn't, I didn't do it. And it just made things so much clearer and so much easier in terms of decisions and whatnot. I always had that North Star of saying, okay, this is what I want. Will this help me get there? If it does, great, let's do it. If it doesn't, push it to the side. I think that's super important.
Yeah.
Bryan, I want to ask you a little bit about that, because that can be harder to identify than it sounds. It's a simple concept, define what you want, define, your values, but that can be a really challenging process. One of the things we've discussed on the show before is some of us who are achievers, we tend to over-identify with our accomplishments, which is distinct from what we really want. And sometimes that can become a big distraction. You never get out of that trophy mindset. Like, I need to get the degree, then I need to get the massive office, then I need to get the speaking engagements, then I need to get all this stuff. And you're just acquiring badges, so to speak. If it was really that fulfilling, you wouldn't need so much more of it, and you wouldn't have that constant hunger. I mean, I think hunger is a good thing to some degree, but how do you break that cycle? How do you really define what's important to you so that your goals can serve that, as opposed to just having goals for the sake of having goals?
So that's what, goes back to figuring out what you want. And like I mentioned, it's not, like you said, it's not easy to do. And I think for me figuring out what I wanted, there was two things. There was one, I experienced a lot of things that I did not like, right? So I kind of backed into it. So it's like, if you figure out all the things you don't like, it'll eventually put you in a spot to knowing what you do want, right? Like if you associated in an office where they saw, 100 patients or 200 patients, just for the sake of the example, and you were burned out and tired and your head was spinning, you feel like you couldn't do the best you could do. Well, when you open your own practice, or when you have control over that, okay, I don't want to have this super busy practice where I'm seeing all these patients. If it is, I associated with a practice that did a bunch of technology and everything was just in shambles and they could never figure anything out. Well, when you open your practice, you stay traditional, right? So I
Mm-hmm.
think part of what, for me, at least, a lot of things that directed me to knowing what I wanted was because I experienced a lot of things that I didn't want. And that kind of
Interesting.
pointed me in a direction. And then the other thing is, and I've shared this story before, I mean, it's going on like 5 years now, but it was right after COVID when I had pretty much a stick up situation with my clinical team, basically making all these
Hmm.
demands. I mean, it was again right after, well, it was during COVID because COVID wasn't over in 2020. But after we had kind of figured some things out in terms of when we can get back to the office, everyone lost their mind. And my
Mm.
team was part of that losing of the minds. And so, they band together. I guess they thought, strength in numbers could carry a little weight, but literally sat me down and had a list of demands that they wanted and or that they were, they had other offers and they were going to leave. And they knew
Mm.
that, the assistants are the lifeblood, at least from a clinical standpoint in an
Sure.
orthodontic practice. Like they are so
Mm-hmm.
valuable. It was a tough decision, but Lauren and I, we let all 5 of them walk, like
Wow.
literally just go. And it was a very stressful, tough time to be because it was just a lot of worry, right? Like, okay,
Mm-hmm.
so this is going to be stressful. Are the patients going to pick up on this when they show up, right? Like, are we going to be so wound up, so stressed out? Is our customer service going to fall off? What about the other team members like the TC, the front desk and all that? Are they going to look at this like, what's going on here? I'm getting off this burning ship before, I get
Yeah.
burned. And, so it was just a lot of stress and a lot of worry. And we toughed through. Now, the good thing is I did have her to go through it with, so I wasn't by myself. But I mean,
Mm-hmm.
we did bondings, we tied people in, we did what we had to do. But the beauty of it all, though, is when we came out on the other end of it, we had this new enlightenment on what we wanted. So this is kind of like the second phase of how I, arrived at the point of doing things the way I like to do them. Because when that happened, that was right when we were really starting to get into a lot of the digital technology. And it kind of
Mm.
saved us a little bit from the standpoint of, if we wanted a same day start, that was just a scan for us, right? You take the pictures
Mm-hmm.
and you send the scan, and we weren't literally putting the braces on that day. We were sending it off to Light Force. If it was the liners, the same thing. And
Yeah.
so that part of it, we didn't have to stunt our growth. And the new assistants that we trained, we brought a whole batch. I think it was 4 at a time, fresh out of dental assisting school, 6 weeks in, 6 weeks out. And but all we had to do was teach them how to scan and take pictures, right? And
Yeah.
so instead of trying to go over every single thing with them, we could just start with, listen, as long as you can take pictures and scans, because that was refinements, that
Yep.
was new starts. And so a good portion of our practice could still move on, even though we had all these little fires. I'm talking about not even knowing what the wires are, what the colors are, how to put a power chain on,
Yeah.
but we were able to make it through. And so from that standpoint, it was, okay, one, I know now that I am the leader of this ship, right? Like
Yep.
we are what's responsible for keeping this thing going. The team members are extremely important and we can't do it without them. But at the end of the day, the show can go on as long as we are at the helm of it. And so, if there's ever a situation since then where we have something where somebody's leaving, it's like, okay, if this is just one person, this is nothing. We had 5
Mm-hmm.
go all at the
Yeah.
same time, right?
Yeah.
So it
Yeah.
gave us that confidence to not be scared about letting people walk, right?
Yeah.
And then the second part of it is like, okay, well, now we saw how this helped us out and helped us get through the storm. Let's double down and triple down on technology so that we never have to become super reliant on team members again. And
Yeah.
again, we have assistants and we have a team member. It's not like this technology is going to delete every other,
Right.
team member out of the practice, but it does empower us to know that, even if we have a big shakeup like that again, we'll be okay because we have things in place that simplifies everything. So that's how I got to where I was, between working other jobs and seeing what I didn't want, but then also having that unfortunate event kind of push me in a direction where I had to just buckle down and get through it is how I arrived at where I am in my mindset that I have right now.
It's interesting how that pressure turns you into a diamond sometimes. Yeah.
Well, Andy, you had a similar experience.
No, I've had that
Yep.
experience a couple times, actually. Yeah. The worst one that I can remember happened fairly recently. So as you're describing what you were talking about, Bryan, I was thinking it was almost exactly a year ago today. We were doing pretty well, but things started to kind of, I don't want to out anyone here, so I'm not going to go into too much detail here, but there were some red flags starting to come up. Okay, I'll put it that way. It came to a head we had to lose a very critical team member who was in charge of a lot clinically.
Yeah, that's tough.
When this went down, it felt really devastating, but I was like, as long as we don't lose anyone else, we can get through this. Like, I'm going to have to do a lot of work because there's no one else who knows how to do the digital stuff. I was like, as long as I can keep the ship together. But that very same day, another team member came up to me and said, "Hey, Doc, I know this is bad timing, but my husband got transferred to Houston and I gotta be out too." And I'm like, okay, that sucks. That really sucks, because she had just started working for us too. Then within 2 weeks, another team member had a family crisis across the country, and she had to leave with no return date. I mean, she was probably going to have to be a permanent caregiver. So now we were down 3. We only had 5 in our clinic. Then within another couple of weeks, another one says it was always a plan of hers to go work for her fiance. She goes and does a business with him. And she's, "I'm going to give you to the end of the year, but I got to go too." And this is exactly what I was fearing. So what you were describing, Bryan, is the same thing that happened to me, and I call that quicksand, which is where you lose a couple of critical members, and maybe that's a step in the right direction.
Everyone starts to panic.
But everyone starts to panic. There's more workload for everyone. You're stressed out. Everyone's stressed out, and that's when good team members start to melt down. And you have to rely on them a little bit more. You don't want to, but you have no choice. And then sometimes they start to buckle and start to think, "I got to get out of here before the ship sinks entirely." And that's when you fall into a bad spot. Now, that we unfortunately did hit that. We lost another couple critical team members all around that same time.
Wow.
Just like literally it was a week before we had everything, all the pieces back in place, and another one broke. And this was like a big one. I'm curious your thoughts on how to avoid that situation, or maybe how to deal with that better in the future. I mean, one thing that I've thought of is we're always training now. We're always hiring. I have a philosophy where I'm willing to be overstaffed as long as that person is worth being overstaffed for. And then once you hire that person who's worth being overstaffed for, that means every person on your team has to be worth being overstaffed for. So I do think that it puts you back in the driver's seat. It may be a little bit hard on payroll in the beginning, but also if you're playing with all A players, I mean, you have nowhere to go but up. So that's one solution I have to it. I'm interested to what have you learned from that, Bryan and Chris? Chris, I'll start with you, Chris. Have you gone through something like that? And if not, how do you prevent that?
Yeah, my situation was a little different. So I joined a senior doc who he had a very different way of managing his team than I did. And it was tough because from day one, they were against me. They were more Larry's way. And every one that I had hired and I had a chance to train absolutely loved me and followed my vision. But there was like the war of the visions, right? Well, this doctor is more of a dictator, and I like that he's like the patriarch and tells me what to do and whatever. And then you have me where I'm really easygoing and I want them to become kind of like family to me. And I think that if they're in a place where they feel safe and they feel autonomous, where they can run their area independently, and we just kind of meet a few times and talk about it, that's the way I did it. So there was this constant dichotomy. And so we had a revolving door for years where like new hires would quit. And then, it was tough. And we found out later there was a virus that had been around for 25 years, the one that was under the thumb of the senior doctor, and just kind of
COVID-19.
No, a different virus, like a staph infection, like STAFF infection is what we had. And we identified that. And since that was gone, and that pretty much everyone that's on the team now, except for 1 or 2 that have adapted, they say adapt or perish, right? With the new vision, it's been great. And we've gone almost a year and a half, 2 years without any turnover, which we've never had. But that comes back to just being true to your values, investing in them. Like we do a lot of team activities. And I did what you did, Andy. I asked team members to recommend friends that they've worked with. And then I tried to get friends together. And then I tried to make it so there's not cliques, but we do things together. And then everyone wants to come to work because they're there with their friends. They'll go to a place where they feel they belong more than $1 more an hour or $2 more an hour. And they need to find a place where they feel like it's home and they look forward to it. And so now we have a team, everybody pitches in. I feel like we have the dream team now, but it took us 11 years to get there. And I think if you stick to, like you said, overhire and don't be afraid to let the viruses go. Like I wish I had done that, 10 years ago, but you just kind of keep them on because they're talented. Like you said, the talented terror, right? There's no sides. We're all together. Either we all win or it's a no-go. So if anything, I think just really treating your team like family and really care about them and mean it. You can't just say, hey, you're like family to us. No, you are part of my family, and really invest in them emotionally has been huge for us.
I think that's great. I want to push back just a little bit, and then I'm going to pass it over to Bryan. But that concept of treating your team like family, like we hear that a lot. I heard what I think is a better analogy, which is treating your team like a team, because in the end, it's not exactly family, because your family would work for you for free if they had to, right? Now, everyone at your office, no one's working for free. Everyone is there because they have a bigger why than I just love you, Chris, and I really want to see you succeed. And as good and friendly and likable as you are, I don't think anyone's working for you for free. And I think that that's something that we have to acknowledge. And this is also why they say don't hire family. You don't want to hire someone that you can't fire. That doesn't mean that you're a dick. And I don't think there's anything wrong with seeing your team as teammates. Mm-hmm. You still have the same kind of bonding. You still have to rely on each other. You have to have the cooperation. You want to be, friends with each other, have some sort of relationship that's worth going to work every day. But it's not exactly family, because with family, you make exceptions that can be detrimental to the other people in the family, correct? You would keep a family member in your family if they were a total toxic person, and draining on the morale of everyone, but they're your family, so you keep them around. That would not be a logical decision to make for a team, because other people can just leave.
Maybe family is not the exact word, like you said, but I think you have to care about them more than looking at like a productive unit of your practice, which I think a lot of us fall into.
Yeah.
Oh, how do they do for us? But if you think about how can I make them get what they want, how can I help them advance?
Yes.
Then that's more of like, I think it goes beyond a team member. So maybe it's somewhere in between a team member and a family member, to where that you actually care about their personal success. Like when someone has a baby, we celebrate it in our office. And I know that there's jokes going around from other, people that say, oh, don't get pregnant. It's like, oh my gosh, like what's going on? But in our office, we celebrate that. Or if somebody wants to go to hygiene school, they're advancing themselves. We celebrate that. And what happens? They come back and they tell their friends, like, I may be going on to hygiene, but you got to work for Dr. Teeters, So that's what you want. You want a culture where you care about them as an individual. But you're right. I think family is different. Like you said, if you have someone in the family who's tough, you wouldn't kick them out of your family, but you would probably let someone go from your practice. Yeah.
Unless they're family, of course. Bryan, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. So, there's no way to prevent it. If something happens, and Chris, when you were talking about the virus, that's exactly what happened to us. And unfortunately, it was our clinical lead. Like, it was our best clinical assistant. And the only reason we really found out is because we brought in an assistant as a working interview. And we offered her a job, and it was like above what she was asking for. Everything was fine. And she was like, nah, I can't do it. And I'm like, everyone wants to work with me. What are you talking about? No one turns me down. Like, what is this? And so the funny thing is like, you know what? We reached out to her, and we were like, because this is right around when all the stuff was kind of bubbling. So, we knew something was a little off. And we were like, hey, just, hey, we respect your decision. That's fine. We're not going to, try to beg you to come or whatnot. But we just want to have a conversation that's, like, how did you arrive to your decision? And she said that it is too much drama in that practice. And she was like, and that one girl, I can't remember her name, but she was asking me, how much y'all were going to offer me. And they were talking about other people may be leaving because they want to get paid more. And I'm just like, this is the person who I literally, because this was at the time when I was still doing in-house aligners. So she's like in the lab. And if I needed somebody, if some patient was coming on Monday, she would come in on a Friday and do this for me to make sure we had it done. And she made sure she was, to me, what I thought was like the right-hand person, like, the ace. And for her to do that and to be like that, especially when she had not experienced that herself, like we had never, like anytime she had asked for a raise, she got it, because that was a no-brainer. Like she did way more than what she was supposed to do as an assistant. So she was well taken care of. And for her to do that was kind of heartbreaking. And so what it showed me was, kind of going back to your point about, family and team members, at the end of the day, everybody's looking out for their best interest. And so I don't think you can prevent it from that standpoint. But so what you have to do is think about, what things can I do that if it happens, I can still keep everything on track with minimum disruption. And for me, it is one, cross training multiple people to do everything, because a lot of issues we had was once this person was let go, no one knew how to, when we were supposed to change the sterilization fluid,
Yeah.
who were supposed to send the spore test out, just like little stuff. And everybody's looking around like, what the heck? And so we literally were scratching our heads trying to figure all this stuff out. And so now what we do is we have everybody who's in a lead position, they write out what their duties are. And if it's somebody like my my digital assistant, because this is the second one that I've had, the first one was the same thing. I was like, man, she knows how to 3D print. How am I going to figure out, how am I going to train somebody? Like, is this even a job for an assistant? Is this just a regular person off the street that I get? And I was kind of freaking out about it. But now for every printer, we have, what you do, you turn it on, you mix it up. This is the resin for that. The printers are labeled. And so there's a whole protocol so that if somebody new comes in between videos and then the written protocols, I mean, you can't just step in and just do it, but you know what you're working towards. And even for the training point, from my standpoint, I can train them more effectively now because I have a blueprint already, as opposed to trying to do something spur of the moment. And so cross training and having written out protocols is the best way to do it, so that when the rubber hits the road and things get bad, you can plug and play a lot better. And the same thing happens when patients go on, or team members go on vacation, and it's like, well, now all of a sudden this isn't getting submitted, this is falling through the cracks. Those opportunities to realize, okay, we need to get protocols and get things in order, because this is a potential weak spot if this person was to go. And the other part of it is too, when people know that they can do something no one else in the office can do, there's a sense of entitlement that sometimes comes with that. Yes. And there's an expectation that they're irreplaceable because, quote unquote, this, what y'all would do without me. It starts with like little jokes and stuff like that, but they really start to feel that way. And I've had a lot of people that I were interviewed from other offices, and they would say, I built that practice. And I'm like, the mindset of these team members sometimes can be a little out of whack. And so I think knowing that other people can do their job kind of helps it out as well. But in the event that you lose somebody, having somebody else that can do it and then having the protocols, to me, is the best way to try to weatherproof the storm, if you will.
Dude, Bryan, I feel like we've had such a similar experience with this. I mean, I could have literally said everything you just said, and same solutions too. So I'll only add that in addition to the cross training and the written protocols, we no longer have a clinical lead, and that has, that's challenging. It has its own problems, but it does prevent anyone from getting a little bit too big of a head and then starting to develop that entitlement. Everyone gets trained on everything, and that means that I've had to really simplify our systems as well, because it needs to be simple enough that someone could literally just read the PowerPoint that I have on how to, say, 3D print something and be able to do it without much more training than that. Additionally, I've eliminated a lot of stuff. We do a lot less 3D printing in our office than we used to, because one of the things I recognized is that I want to keep my staff footprint as small as possible and as non-specialized as possible, especially when it comes to the clinic. Someone who knows how to 3D print is pretty specialized. So I've basically started outsourcing all of that with very few exceptions. We use a lot of digital products as well. I'm a little bit mixed on digital, just to be honest with you. I mean, we do indirect bonding. We do ODB with Damon braces, which I love. That's been great. I just like the workflow personally. Obviously, we do the digital with aligners as well. One of the pushbacks I'm going to give against the all digital is that it might reduce the total number of staff that you need. And I will say might. I'm not completely convinced on that yet. But it does increase the level of specialization of the remaining staff. It makes you more dependent on them. At least that's my theory. I'll support that by saying you need someone who knows how to set up a case. I mean, back when we were using ULab, that was a very specialized position to segment the teeth. It's gotten a lot simpler since then, but it was a very specialized position. They need to know how to do the indirect bonding, which is not something that they do in a lot of other offices. There's not a lot of offices in my area that do indirect bonding. So I get a 20-year experienced assistant, and I'm teaching her from scratch how to use Damon braces and how to do that.
Pretty much at the same level as a newbie. Yeah.
So, I mean, there's a balance there. And I want to ask you about that. You're the digital guy, Bryan, so where's that balance struck between reducing your overall staff footprint, but then becoming even more reliant on the fewer staff members that you have?
So the way I look at it, and you brought it up earlier about simplifying everything, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
you went to this era of like, let's simplify.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, that is the biggest benefit of going digital. And I talk about this a lot of times. It's like, for me, everything starts with the scan, right? So we're using custom light force braces, right? We're using
Mm-hmm.
clear aligners with Angel. We're doing lingual with Embrace. So all of these are custom appliances. So all of it starts with the scan. So all of that's the same. When it's time to apply these appliances, it's all indirect bonding, right?
Mm-hmm.
So whether it's the custom, fixed braces, if it's aligners with attachments, if it's the lingual, all of it's indirect bonding. So it is streamlined and simplified to the umpteenth degree for me.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason and that's what I mentioned, everyone has their own reason for wanting to do the digital thing. Some is, I want to kind of maximize the most profit I can get out of it. So I want to, do things so that I can get more patients and have more starts and grow my practice. Or for me though, it is more so I do want to have a lean team, and I get the flip side of that as well. If somebody goes out, you're really
Mm-hmm.
lean, but at the same time, for me, it's just less headache. Like I just don't
Mm-hmm.
want to deal with the too many personalities that come with it. So being able to
Yeah.
run lean is beneficial to me. But the biggest thing for me is the flexibility that it gives me with my practice, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like
Mm-hmm.
I lecture a decent amount. I like to golf. I travel with my family. Like I need time away from the clinic.
Yeah.
And I became super fixated on, okay, what can I do to first shrink the days work? Because remember, I was doing the 4 day, sometimes 5 day a week. And I was like, I need to shrink this. And so I tried to figure out ways that I could shrink that without compromising, growth or whatnot, right? Because obviously you can just do a lot less if you want, and you can get to the same result. But I didn't want to compromise on that. And so for me, it's all about simplification so that I can be leaner, because again, it's easy for me to train someone in my office. And you're absolutely right. I've had people come in with experience and they couldn't hold a candle to a person I hired a year ago who was fresh out of dental school, right? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
assisting school, but that's just in my practice. But you take that 1 year out assistant from my practice and put her in another practice, she wouldn't know what to do. And he or she
Yeah.
wouldn't know what to do in that office. But for me, it is just so much easier for me to train a staff and a team member on these digital appliances, because it's the same thing for them.
Mm-hmm.
But it does things like free up appointments. I'm getting my cases done on time, and all of this is reducing my total number of active patients. And I talk about this a lot. We get excited about starts and growth, and I think that's super important. I mean, that's the health of our practice and how we maintain it. But the debond is where we make the money. Getting the braces off or getting the aligners and everything, that's where we make money. And I think we sometimes undervalue how critical it is when we have patients that are in treatment 30 months, 35, 36 months.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, yes, that patient comes in for a 15, 20-minute appointment. And you're thinking, well, that's not that big of a deal. I'm going to be
Yeah.
here anyway. But
Yeah.
it just becomes an additive problem. And then now all of a sudden your intervals have to be 12, 14 weeks out, not because you want to, or that's how much time you need. It's just because you have to. Right.
Yeah.
And then now the braces are finally ready to get off and you schedule for a debond, but then that's another 12 weeks out. And then now a bracket is off and the tooth is shifted.
Yeah.
Or, something happens and you need to reschedule patients, and now you have to shift around 120 patients. But guess what? You have nowhere to shift them because your
Yeah.
schedule is so jam packed. And so it's just one of those things where I think we don't sometimes, like, we know that it's beneficial to get the braces off in a timely manner. Like, we are aware of that, but I don't think we put enough emphasis on how important that is. And so
Yes.
again, for me, digital has helped me reach that goal. Now, I know a lot of people will say, you can just be extremely efficient with traditional things like non-digital. And I think that's true.
Yeah.
And the pushback I give is like, well, when I was using traditional appliances, it wasn't like I was trying to be inefficient, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
I had the same mindset. I was trying to be as efficient as I can, but there are just certain benefits that you can't get around. And like, you have that class 1 spacing crowding. I mean, that's aligners all day for me, because I can
Mm-hmm.
control the posterior occlusion where, if I had to put braces on, traditional braces on, and now the bite went to slightly class 2, and this 12-month case that I've quoted out for 12 months now is 18 or 20 months because of the iatrogenic things that I've done. And so it's like all these little things that, you can't really put a value on, but they help me get braces off. They help helped me minimize the number of appointments, which ultimately allows me to practice the number of days that I want and see the number of patients that I want to see, so that I can get out and do what I want to do. And then the days that I do work, I'm actually energized to do it, because it's like I'm not, worn down by it. So, I mean, I see it both ways, and I'm not, the person that'll sit up here and say that if you're not going in all on digital, you're doing it wrong, or you're not efficient, or you're not having a fulfilling life. That is not at all what I'm saying. Yeah. Everyone has to do what's best for them. And for me, and where I want to be and how I want to practice, just investing in digital has helped me achieve those goals. And that's just what it boils down to.
Awesome.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. Chris, did you have anything? It looked like you had something to say.
No, just kind of along the same lines, not so much a digital, but trying to get to that 3 days and making your practice as efficient as you can. Like we just recently introduced admin days, and on those days they do non-doctor appointments. And I used to think, I had to be in the office for everything, but things that are predictable, they can do. And my wife's there. So technically there's supervision, so to speak, if needed. But we found that I've been as productive on 3 days as 4, but that frees up another day to do what I love. And don't get me wrong, I love orthodontics. I think 3 days is the sweet spot for me. I feel energized, like you said, Bryan. I also love music, but I honestly, if I did music 5 days a week, I would probably dislike music. So we talk about finding that happiness. For me, it's like finding the 5 things I love the most and kind of like finding the optimal amount of time I like to spend on those 5 things. Like you mentioned, golf might be one of those for you, but I think everybody needs a hobby, fitness, family, their career, and like some type of or faith if you're into that too. And I find that when I'm balanced on those 5 things, that's when I'm most productive. I'm a better husband. I'm a better orthodontist. I'm better in a lot of things. But I think the key is we can still be type A people and still go all out. But if you go all in 5-6 days a week, you will burn out. And I think you can go all in and just vary what you go all in about over maybe 5 other obsessions that you have, and still feel like you're accomplishing things. And I say that as an Enneagram 3, as a driver. Like I really like to achieve things, but I think when we singularly focus on ortho, we miss some other great things in life. So that's been my experience.
100%.
Well, I think this has been a really fun conversation. I appreciate you guys all making this work. I know you're busy. You got a big meeting tomorrow, and it's late over there, so we don't want to keep you guys too late.
Bryan, you're still in my hotel room. This has been an hour and a half. It's 10:30 right now.
Maybe the night is young for you guys. I mean, Chris has had his first drink in a while. I'm sure he wants to celebrate.
Listen, the animal might come out. I got to get out of here.
Well, I would love to end this, Bryan, with three of your top pearls. They could be clinical. I mean, you're a clinical guy. They could be life. But what are your top 3 pearls that you could offer for our listeners?
So the first one is non-clinical, and I'm going to go with comparison is the thief of joy. And
yes,
I think we have to be careful with that. And I get the point of inspiration and seeing what can be done, but the way I look at it is, and it can go both ways, right? It could be me talking to someone whose practice is way bigger than mine and thinking, man, am I not doing enough? Or someone whose practice is smaller than mine, and then they're looking at me like, man, I'm not doing enough. And they could be doing exactly what they need to do. And so for me is more so like, that's why I don't, and it's nothing wrong with it, but you don't know anybody that knows my numbers, because I don't talk about it, right? Like it's a moot point for me. Now, we'll talk about things that we can do to improve and be more profitable and all that, but just sharing numbers to me never really made a lot of sense. And like I said, I get the point of it to kind of see like, listen, you could be doing X, Y, Z. Well, you can just tell me what you're doing to be profitable without us sharing the numbers. And as much as you try to, this is my friend, this is my buddy, we're not in competition. We're not even in the same state. We're not, sometimes that can kind of bleed over. So just be careful with that. I'm not saying don't have friends that you talk shop with and that you go over things and discuss things with, because I think that's important. We don't need to practice in a silo by ourselves, but just be careful of that. And understand and be self-aware to know that where you are is such a blessing, and that there's somebody that wish they could be in the position that you're in. So that's the first pearl that I will give from a non-clinical standpoint. And then the second thing is from a clinical standpoint, I think, I've hit on it a little bit, but being able to have everything in your clinic kind of run in the same direction. And I kind of mentioned that a little bit about, all the appliances that I use that are indirect bonding, how everything just kind of flows in the same direction. Because when you have things that are mismatching, right? Like you have this super digital practice, but you're still taking impressions for your retainers. It kind of messes up the flow of everything. And I know that's not a very specific thing because it's kind of vague, but having your office, and that's why it's kind of important to identify kind of where you want to be and maximize that. But if you have whatever you've established that you want to be, double down on that and make everything flow in the same direction, and try not to mix up, all these different things, because it'll become a headache. You'll have a team that's stressed out and start to freak out. You'll become confused and worn out. And so just flow downstream with everything that you're doing in the clinic. And the last thing is kind of in those same lines is, and I know I'm going to sound like a broken record, but you really got to look at this digital stuff. And I'm not going to go in any specifics because everybody can go. There's so many options out there, right? And everyone has what they're willing to do. And as business owners, you can draw the line wherever you want to draw it. But I really do feel like that is where the profession is going. And that's the reason, like, you look at a company like Ormco, like I used them before I started using Lightforce, and I still go, like, I love my Ormco rep. So I'll still go to the lectures and stuff that we have for the local study clubs. And I saw, Dr. Damon come in and talk, and, I've seen the presentation on the indirect bonding setups that they do. And so that's just, that's where companies are going. Like, this has been a tried and true, like, bracket company from the day one. And now they have clear aligners. They're investing in indirect bonding. And it's the same thing with 3M. And so I don't think it's by mistake that all these companies are moving in this digital direction. And I just feel like being comfortable with that is going to be a huge boost. Now, that's not to say that if you're not doing this 5 years from now, your practice is going to poof and disappear and you're going to be antiquated and out of date. But I think there is going to come a point where you're going to have to make that transition to something digital, in whatever capacity that is. I don't know. But being able to really start investing into that while you can kind of dip your toe in and do your research before it's like, okay, I have to switch. And now you're thrust into the fire to do it. So that's kind of a pearl that I have. And not everybody's going to agree with that. I'm sure there's somebody who's going to hear this and be like, oh, that's crap. Nobody needs this. Da, 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 da. And I won't say that they're wrong. I mean, everybody, there's people who have a lick of digital technology in their office and they're killing it right now. Right. So I'm not saying that they're wrong, but I just feel like just looking at where everything is and where things were just 5 years ago, it's hard to deny that that's where we're going.
Well, I love that, Bryan. And I'll just end with a comment on that. So I'm a firm believer that the best tool for your patients is the one that works the best in your hands. And that's the one usually that you've practiced at the most. I mean, you have docs who have been at this 30, 40 years, and whatever mechanics they're using, they're probably very traditional, but they're ninjas at it. I mean, they can probably easily do that. They could probably do some cases better than I can do with digital. I mean, it's just based on experience there. But with that, I also think that if you're learning to drive a car, you can either learn to drive a Toyota and drive that very, very well, or if you're lucky enough to be able to afford a Ferrari or have access to one, it's a different kind of driving. And if the ceiling on a Ferrari is going to be higher than a ceiling on a Camry, right? So you can take that analogy for whatever it's worth. I'm not implying that, people are driving Camrys or Ferraris out there in their practices, but the idea here is that you do want to choose the tool that you think has the best long-term potential. And to me, that's the highest ceiling on whether it's efficiency, clinical excellence, or just what you like. Pick the one that you can really invest yourself in and consider the ceiling in doing that. So, all right, guys. Well, hey, thanks so much for being on the show today. Good luck with your meeting tomorrow. To all our listeners out there, thanks for staying with us again. We encourage you, please go ahead and like and subscribe to our podcast if you like what you're hearing here. We will see you guys on the forum.
Over and out.
If you're an orthodontist that wants to connect with over 500 colleagues, hear over 30 of the best speakers in orthodontics, and see 50 of the most cutting-edge exhibits, have a chance to win some of over $70,000 worth of prizes, including a trip to Kauai, and enjoy the absolute best parties in orthodontics, you won't want to miss the 7th annual MOPC, the Mother of Pearls Conference, coming this October 9th through 11th. We're going big for our 7th year by renting out the Astronaut Memorial Foundation at the Kennedy Space Center in Cape Canaveral, Florida. This is the hub for NASA, where they train more astronauts than anywhere else in the world, and SpaceX launches occur all the time. We toured the campus, and let me tell you, it's like the Disney World of space, with theme park attractions, actual space shuttles, interactive exhibits, and real astronauts. On top of the best speakers, we'll be having our world-famous Friday Night Pearls party under the Saturn Apollo 5 rocket, with dinner, drinks, space-themed activities, and live music from the world's only all-orthodontist band, Relapse. Early bird prices are about to go up for every 100 tickets sold and have already gone up twice. Be sure to register today with your team at orthodonticpearls.org to get the best price for the best conference in orthodontics. Plus, we are the only conference with worry-free registration. If anything comes up and you can't make it for any reason, you can transfer your registration to next year's conference absolutely free. It's a no-brainer. So be sure to lock in your best price by registering you and your team for the best conference in orthodontics, the Mother of Pearls Conference, at orthodonticpearls.org today.